Hello and welcome to C4 Discussions, where we engage in compassionate, clarifying, courageous conversations about real world issues and concerns, and where messy meets metaphysical. We are your hosts. I'm Ray,
And I'm James.
and let's begin. Hello and welcome, folks. Episode 3. James, how you doing?
I'm excellent, Ray. How about you?
Doing well, doing well. I'm excited about today. So if you're ready, let's jump in.
Okay. So we have a guest today, and I'm just super excited about this guest. She's a family of choice person for me. We've been talking regularly for several weeks, and we've become extraordinarily close. I'm just going to read a bio about her. Reverend Christine Renée Monks is a licensed minister with Centers for Spiritual Living, a certified life coach, a transgender activist, and public speaker. Since she transitioned from male to female in 2017, she has found her voice through ministry, choral singing, and trans advocacy. She is a grandmother, a father, a pilot, and an instrument flight instructor. Her life's noble purpose is to share her gender dysphoria journey openly and vulnerably, to foster greater empathy and acceptance between cisgender and transgender communities. Welcome, Reverend Ray. Welcome, Reverend Christine.
You can welcome us
Welcome.
both. Hi.
It is great to have you here, Reverend Christine Renee. It is great to have you with us. Thank you for carving some time out of your busy schedule. We appreciate
It's
it.
my pleasure to be here. Thank you both.
Thank you. So jump us off. Tell us, what do you want our growing audience to know?
Well, it's an interesting time to be a transgender woman in the United States. I never had any expectation that so much of the country's attention would be on what bathroom I use and what athletic participation I might or might not be allowed to have. And I can't help but believe that at this time in our history, it's not accidental that I am a minister and a transgender advocate and activist to try to foster greater understanding, because the opinions that people express are very strongly held, but I think they also often stem from a place of ignorance or fear or both. And so I'm working on creating a vision of what I think, which is acceptance for each of us to be our true authentic selves and not be caught up in what I sometimes call the gender straitjacket, where society tells us how we have to show up as a man or a woman, and just be me to the best ability that I have.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Well, that's a new term that I'm going to marinate on that, the gender straitjacket, because that shows up in so many different ways, including in our previous episode, one of the things James and I spoke about was the whole idea of why do we make blue and pink specific gender, what's with the whole gender reveal? Like, in my mind, that's an example of a gender straitjacket where little girls are supposed to do this and wear this and act this way. Little boys are supposed to do, but based on what? So thank you for introducing a new term into my consciousness.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's kind of arbitrary. People don't believe that gender is a social construct, but if you go back and research it, which I did for one of my papers with my master's degree, for a long time, pink was thought to be a stronger, more masculine color. And then it was sometime around the 1920s or 30s that there was a catalog that featured it the other way. And since then, that has been the term for all of these things, is that you have to be blue if you're a boy and pink if you're a girl. So, but I am wearing a pink dress today, so I thought I would at least embrace the gender straitjacket that I'm in by wearing pink.
It's all good, because I spoke at Unity by the Bay a couple weeks ago and I had a full pink suit, so it's all good.
With pink shoes, no less.
Yeah, true that. Yes.
Cool. Yeah, for me, gender straitjacket's a very powerful term. And as that term gets introduced in our culture, people can have the opportunity to wake up. Because a lot of people live inside the construct, like we talked about, the social construct. There's only two. There's only female and male. And with a term like this, gender straitjacket, it can wake people up and give them some possibilities for shifting out of that really strict binary.
Yes, and the gender identity, how we see ourselves or feel about ourselves, is inexorably aligned with our sex assigned at birth. That also seems to be something that a lot of people are really doubling down on a lot, is that it's immutable. It was assigned at birth and nothing can ever deviate from that, which certainly isn't my experience.
Yeah.
And real quick, no, go ahead, James.
Yeah. So thank you for pointing out what's happening, like the elephant in the room right now, pointing out that there's a lot of political and social structures that are ripping apart trans folks and ripping apart LGBTQ plus folks. So thank you for speaking truth. Thank you for speaking power to truth.
And I was just going to throw in, since James mentioned the whole concept, the binary idea, and the three of us are reverends, even though it's a different teaching. In the Talmud, if I'm correct, they reference 8 genders, 8 distinct genders in the rabbinic tradition of Judaism. So what happened? Like, how did we get to this place of, if we go back to traditions and, the indigenous peoples of all kinds of various cultures, even Gnostic Christianity back in the day. And then here we are today where it's, oh, no. Oh, no. Boy, girl, that's it. Like, wow, that is just a phenomenal, limiting concept to exist by, especially when, as Christine Renée says, that each of these only two, have very distinct roles that they are permitted to exist within.
Yeah, it's obvious in the Hebrew Bible there were some gender renegades, if you will. I think the story of Joseph in Genesis with the multicolored coat is certainly was a coat that was traditionally worn by women, and certainly some of the stories in Ruth certainly speak to love between two women. So there's lots of other, not necessarily gender diversity all the time, but people who are not identifying with their typical gender roles assigned at the time. So there was some space for it 2,500 or 5,000 years ago. So hopefully we could still hold a little space for that today.
Yes.
Exactly. And real quick, just so, since you mentioned it, for the people in our audience who don't realize, there is a website you can go to identify where in your state various anti-trans bills have been proposed. There are 953 bills, 120 have passed, 186 are active, 647 have failed. And just as an example of a small, minute amount, right now they are tracking 131 anti-trans bills in Texas. And some of them, a great many of them, are revolving around who uses what bathroom and what that entails, and the legal ramifications of using the incorrect one. Just so folks are aware, you can go to jail for this.
Yeah, and a jail that maybe doesn't identify or align with your gender identity either. So if I use a women's restroom in a federal court or on any piece of federal property, I'm breaking federal law and should be thrown in a male prison, which just certainly seems kind of ironic. I mean, I would cause a lot more of a commotion if I went into a men's restroom, or I'd be outing myself. And asking trans men to go into the women's restroom is just an invitation for people feeling unsafe. So I'm not really sure how the narrative gets that this is to protect people. It seems to me like it's a reinforcement of the patriarchy and this old adage that women need to be protected and we need to be able to differentiate between real women assigned at female at birth and then people like Christine, who clearly some people don't see as a real woman. So it's an interesting time to just try not to get into the food fight that is this whole discussion.
Very much so.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. James?
Yeah, so I have a question. I want to circle back to your early childhood, if I may. Approximately how old were you when you noticed gender dysphoria? And if you're comfortable, what was it like for you?
Yeah, thanks for that question. The story in my family is at 3 years old, I told my mom that God made a mistake. I'm supposed to be a girl. And I don't remember that specific conversation, but I remember from a very young age thinking that I should have been a girl or that it would have been better had I been a girl. Now, I was born with a penis and I didn't know any girls that had penises. So I won't say that at 3 I was certain I was a girl. I just knew that who I saw myself as and how I wanted to express in the world were not aligned. And it didn't go over very well. I mean, this was a time before the term transgender even was in our lexicon. And I think both my parents just thought I was going to be an effeminate little boy and gay. And that weren't very happy about that concept either. Mm-hmm. So my dad was a Marine. He fought in the Second World War. He was a really tough, scary man. And he just thought I was going to be a sissy and he didn't want that. So I had good parts of my childhood and I had challenging parts of my childhood. I got made fun of and called a fag a lot. I got beat up a lot. And, you just do the best you can to navigate it. But nowhere in that time, through subsequent conversations that I do remember with my mom, going through puberty was particularly dysphoric for me, is she just shrugged her shoulders and said, "What are you going to do?" There was just not even any options on the table for what to do about it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for speaking to what I heard. You didn't say it this way, but what I heard was like you were like in this tight little cubicle with very little wiggle room. And I'd like to honor and acknowledge your courage. From a very, very young age, you were in this challenging situation. So thank you. And thank you for the amazing work that you've done through the years to be where you're at right now as a trans woman.
Thank you for that. I'm much happier now as Christine than I ever was previously.
Yeah.
Right. And isn't that important? I mean, living someone's authentic life. In my mind, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the right to be happy how you are. And yet we fight so much against that. I mean, So when James first told me, and I mean, like, I know you from Facebook or whatnot, but we hadn't officially met. So when James mentioned you, as soon as he said Christine, my mind immediately went to Trailblazer Christine Jorgensen and it's like, wow, just the concept of, and you mentioned your dad being in the military, and Christine was in the military. It's
She
like, wow.
was. Yeah.
And yet, some of the same fights, some of the same battles, some of the same challenges from what, the 20s, 30s. What year is this? 2025.
25.
Here you are having to deal with, endure, or better word, since you're an activist, you are having to be active in simply saying, I'm human, we are human, can we be happy?
Yeah, Christine Jorgensen was a big source of inspiration to me growing up. My name is somewhat of an homage to her.
Oh, okay.
My middle name was Christopher, so I decided Christine was a feminization, and I love that it was homage to Christine Jorgensen. She was a GI in the Second World War and transitioned in 1952.
Wow.
Had what was called a sex change operation then, and it was quite interesting, and her story was quite interesting. And so, yeah, it's interesting that you made that correlation. My middle name, Renee, I was looking for a name that started with R because I was trying to transpose my initials from before. And I thought Renee was really pretty, and I thought Christine Renee was really pretty, but I didn't know how to spell it. And when I looked it up on Wikipedia, I was really pleased to learn it means reborn or rebirth.
Ooh.
As in Renaissance or things like that. So I thought, okay, well, this is a good sign. This is the right name.
Yes.
Wow. Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's cool. Wow.
Yeah.
So if I may, since you're a trans activist, and some of the words that you said people, use, they weaponize certain words towards you growing up and whatnot. And we know in our culture and society, some of those words are still weaponized. And even what you used regarding Christine Jorgensen, then it was called a sex change. It's not called that anymore, to my knowledge. Just as a trans activist, what are the words we should collectively be using more than these other words, if any?
Yeah, boy, that's a whole big subject, Ray. But it's ironic to me that we call it a gender confirmation surgery right now. And I suppose that means we're confirming our gender by changing our sex to a certain extent. But calling it a sex change operation is not incorrect. It's just considered rather an antiquated term from that standpoint. So gender confirmation surgery or gender affirming surgery, either of those would be generally what you talk about when you talk about physically altering your body. But one of the things I at least want to introduce into our conversation is so many people think this is all about the physicality of changing your body. And many people who are trans choose for a number of reasons not to physically alter their body through a sex change operation. It may be that they do cross-gender hormone treatment. They may not even do that. It may be that they want to express more fluidly, or they want to express in a way that seems like it embraces their personality. So we don't know each other well, but I have no reason to believe you identify as transgender, and yet you love pushing the envelope of people's expectations of what a man can do by showing up in a pink outfit and speaking with that. So to a certain extent, you can be kind of your own little gender renegade, even though you don't identify that way. And sexual orientation is about who you're attracted to, whereas gender identity is who you see yourself as. And oftentimes people conflate those two terms too. It's like when I first told someone I was transitioning, they said, "Oh, so you're gay?" And it's like, well, I don't even know what that term means in the current context. If I like men, do you think I'm gay? Or if I like women, do you think I'm gay? Right? Because it all is through that filter of of how you see someone. So I don't know whether I went too deep on what you were asking on that. There's lots of things around asking people's pronouns or offering pronouns. I notice all three of us are offering our pronouns today. I sometimes get people pushing back against that, saying, well, I don't need to ask your pronouns. I can look at you and tell you what they are. But it's like, well, you can't look at me and tell what my name is. And so why wouldn't you ask my name? And if I offer my pronouns, why wouldn't you accept that or respect that?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And we don't have to go there, but so in my mind, it was certain things like I've been told you don't say trans, you say the full word, transgender. Things like, what's another example? Oh, there's never an ED on it. I've heard a lot of people say someone's transgendered. So just, lingo like that, just.
Yeah. It's an adjective. It's not a noun. I'm not transgendered. I'm not transgender. I'm a transgender woman. So it's an adjective that describes another aspect of my identity. So thank you for that clarification. There's a number of terms that have been used, and I listened to one of your earlier podcasts and I heard you say something about drag queens and things. And that is more of a performance identity than it is transgender. I mean, most drag queens in my experience are gay men who like to occasionally adopt a different stage persona. I'm not a drag queen. I'm not a 24/7 drag queen. So a lot of these things around that, I see people in this conversation getting it conflated. I know some drag queens that are transgender. I know drag queens that are not transgender. And I know transgender folks that are not drag queens. So it's kind of two separate things. One is a way of presenting entertainment. Another is a way of embodying your identity.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yes.
Because we're not going to bring in the word from, way back when. It's one of those words. You know what I'm talking about. We're not even going to speak that into the space. But every now and then I have to check myself correcting someone, letting them know, oh, no. That's like the N word. We will not be. No. So.
Yeah, I think cross-dressing would be a much more, kind term to describe someone who wears clothes of the opposite gender would be considered cross-dressing, or right. I don't know. I'm not even sure cross-dresser should be a noun in that way, the same way that transgender shouldn't, but it's something that's people do. And I guess every transgender woman started off as a cross-dressing person because I had to try on my identity before I knew how I could embrace that as who I was. So it's complex. It deserves some nuanced conversation, I think, is what it invites us to do, is be curious rather than judgmental about it.
Yeah, well said.
Most definitely.
So I want to jump in with a story. So I've known Christine, I think, for 15 years, something like that. And some 10 years ago, I was working at Mile High Church in Lakewood, Colorado on the facilities team. And one of my jobs every Sunday morning was to go in early, open the doors, start coffee, stuff like that. And Christine, Robert, at that point in time, Robert was on one of the teams. They, I use the term they at this point, they assisted in the little snack bar that they had there. And pretty much every Sunday, he and I would say hi, And one Sunday I went in, and I've been watching this, Robert had been starting to be more effeminate. Sometimes he wore lipstick, sometimes he had a scarf on, wearing men's clothing. And one Sunday I went in and said, "Hey, Robert." And Christine came over to me and hugged me. And in this really gentle little voice in my ear said, "James, I want to be called Christine now." And she said that to me, and I kind of crumbled inside. One, because the way she did it was so graceful. The way you did it, Christine, was so graceful. And it honored me. You kept it really private, And the third piece for me is the way you did it. You whispered it in my ear. It's like, it rocked me. And I've told this story again and again and again through the years to share about people's journey as they start, making the choice to be a trans person. And that experience I had with you has shaped me deeply, and been a huge gift to me all these years later.
Thank you. I don't remember that. I know you shared it with me subsequently, but I don't have any recollection of that. It's that time in our lives is the hardest thing a trans person goes through, is that decision to transition. I don't know, I'll make a minor correction. I don't know whether I made the decision to be trans. I made the decision to transition. So
Okay.
the conscious choice that I made was, am I going to live a lie for the rest of my life or not live my truth? Or am I going to stand in my truth, even though I don't know what that looks like? But I think based on how early I knew myself to feel like I wasn't aligned with my physical body, I'm not sure that was a choice. And, and whether it's sexual orientation or gender identity, there's a lot of talk about, is this a choice or not? I fully own that it was a choice to transition. I don't fully agree that it was a choice to be this way, because I tried most of my life to figure out how not to be this way, because I perceived this was going to be a hard way to be. And that hasn't proven incorrect for sure. But that idea of going out and telling everybody that who's known you as, in my case, Robert, that now I'm Christine, it just invites a lot of questions. It invites a lot of eye rolling. It invites a lot of jokes. And it's just not something to joke about. It's like super serious. I mean, I didn't want to die with no one knowing who I really am. That was one of my high motivations for this transition, is I pictured myself on my deathbed telling my daughters, there's something I've never told you about me, is that since I was a very small child, I thought I should be a girl, but I never had the courage to do it. And I didn't want to be that person. So thank you for sharing that memory and recollection.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You make me cry.
Yeah, that what you just said, I think, is a profound statement, that if everyone grasped the gravitas of, I don't want to be on my deathbed and have my life be a secret regarding anything.
Yeah.
Which what I heard was, I want to be able to live out loud as who I am in full expression, because to do anything less than that isn't being true to myself. It's not authentic for me. And if more cisgender, straight, white men specifically, and women, could grasp that concept in their heart, I think the complexities regarding all of the other things and the obsession with genitals, I think all of that stuff would drastically diminish, because the humanity is what would be the focus. I think that's a very different conversation.
Yeah, no, I love that framing of it. I do a lot of work with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm on the Centers for Spiritual Living Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. And ultimately what I think we're trying to achieve, even though DEI seems to be a naughty word right now in the country and we should eradicate it. I mean, diversity is a fact, right? We all show up as diverse expressions of the one divine. But what I think we're trying to create is a place where we feel like we belong. And this idea of being able to show up as my authentic self and not have to edit who I am to fit your perception of who I need to be in order for you to accept me is a much more universal concept than just gender identity and trans folks. Okay, how often do you feel like you need to edit some aspect of yourself when you show up? Maybe you don't express a political opinion because you don't think it would be deemed an appropriate one for you as a minister or as a Black man or whatever other identities, maybe as a gay man. I mean, we all put all these identities on what should trans women believe and what should Black men believe and all these things. And if you say, well, I don't know that that's right, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, Dr. Ray, what's going on with this? You know, we need to talk. You need to kind of get with the program. And there's lots of stuff like that that goes on. And again, I think sometimes trans people are in the world just to show how far some of us will go just to be our authentic selves. Because fortunately, most people don't have to go through anywhere near this much effort to be their authentic selves.
Yes. Yeah.
James?
Yeah, I know of two trans folks in my life. One, I call this person my offspring. They're the person that calls me dad. And they use all three pronouns, or they use three pronouns. They use she, they, and he. And I asked them about that about a year ago. And they said, Dad, sometimes I feel like a woman, and sometimes I feel like a man, and sometimes I feel like both. And when they said that to me, my world just kind of expanded. It's like this person in front of me is modeling like the cutting edge of what gender expression and sexual expression is moving forward. And I recently met another person who's trans who, I can share this because I'm not going to speak their name, but they decided to transition, and they got partway through the transition and they decided they didn't like it. So they stopped transitioning. They were transitioning from female to male. And recently I was talking to this person, and they said, I detransitioned when I decided to not continue going from female to male. And even that term, it's like we've introduced several cutting edge terms in this conversation. Detransition. And I asked them, what does that mean? Because, I never heard the term before. But what they said was, I decided to stop transitioning, and I embraced it. I embraced the whole process of detransitioning. So I think one of the things that we're doing in this podcast, and I think a lot of people on the cutting edge are doing in this culture, probably worldwide culture, is that we are creating new language. And when we create new language, it gives us new traction. It gives us new ways of relating to things and people. It lets us think in a different way, and it expands our horizons. So I think that's one of the things that is really super important about all three of us, is that we're all, I'm speaking for all of us, but I think we're all kind of language geeks. And as we create new pronouns or what have you, as other people create their new worldview and they share it with us with new language, it can be extraordinarily important and extraordinarily powerful.
Very much so. And if I may, Christine, Renee, how often have you experienced what James was just talking about? Because I know a whole bunch of, a lot of transgender human beings in a variety of different settings and places. And so I've heard, of people detransitioning quite often. And often when I hear people reference it, especially in the political arena, it's the idea of, see how many of them regret it? That's why we should stop kids from getting puberty blockers. And that's why we should stop this and stop that. So even that, they're weaponizing. Thoughts, comments regarding any of that? I know that's a lot.
I was going to say, how many hours do we have for our podcast, Ray? So I think the number of people that choose to detransition is rather small. And I think people who have an anti-trans agenda like to trumpet that for the justification that you're bringing up. I think puberty blockers provide a window for someone to get really clear about their gender identity. I think we should be thoughtful about it. I think it should be a conversation that includes parents and doctors and the person. But I think it's important not to get on this train with someone and saying, we're 100% behind you being trans, because at the end of the day, it might just be a phase. Okay. Most of us are not just a phase, but there are some people that just say, the price is too high to pay for this, and I don't want to do this. And I may not be happy as a man, or I may not be happy as a woman, but the price that society is demanding, the price that the culture demands of me to do this is just not worth that. So I think we need to hold a space for both and with regard to this. But I think people should do all of this with counseling, with support, with talking to people, with experiencing it. I mean, I'm fortunate and I have privilege in that I look pretty good as a woman. Okay. People don't call me out and act like I'm not a woman. Mm-hmm. And that's privilege. Okay. Some of my trans sisters just don't look very feminine, either because of the way their bodies matured or their heredity or a million other things. So I acknowledge that, but there might have been part of me that if I had just looked really awful as a woman, I might have just decided to die on my deathbed and never tell anybody, right? Because I was just too worried about what everybody thought about me and all that. So it's a complicated issue. But, back to something I kind of teed up, but I don't know that I completely finished it. The idea that all of this is about our physicality, right? This is all about body modifications and things. And yes, that's part of it. But this is a cultural transition. It's a relational transition. It's a legal transition. All these things. And currently in the United States, it's not possible to legally transition. I mean, what I did 8 years ago is not possible today, to get your gender marker changed on your passport and with Social Security and all these things. So I don't really know how this is going to unfold, whether it's going to continue to not be allowed, whether the courts are going to overrule that that's not an appropriate use of the executive powers. It's kind of, we're up in the air with this, but there are so many more aspects coming out to my family about it, coming out to my daughters, my siblings, all these things, changing every legal document in my life to reflect that now I'm Christine Renée Monks, female, is a lot of darn work. Yeah. Driver's license, titles to cars, frequent flyer mile programs, trusted traveler programs. I mean, it's just, the list is endless to do this. So yes, it's about physically presenting as female. It's about seeing myself as female and enjoying that. But it's also about playing by the rules of what a female's allowed to do. I mean, I've just been surprised at how much privilege that I never realized I had as a man that I no longer have. And it's much, much clearer now, just based on the condescending way sometimes I'm treated, which I'm really surprised about, because I wasn't prepared for that, because like the fish swimming in the water, it was just the privilege I was used to having. And it all felt like I earned it and deserved it, until all of a sudden I didn't have it. So I get interrupted a lot more by men now than I ever did before. You can just tell when they've stopped listening, because they start talking and I'm still talking. And sometimes if I'm being really catty, I'll point out, well, as long as there's sound coming out and my lips are moving, I am still talking, just so you know.
Yes.
Oh, you dropped so many gems in there. Oh my. Okay, so real quick before, because I know James has something. just want to pull this up to let people know that a lot of what Christine Renee just pointed out in terms of what is and is not permissible now, even the concept of, so I just want to highlight this because it changing or traveling, what someone's passport once said when this is my identity now has to be what was my identity, not what it is, what it was. So to put it in context, imagine that on our passports, there was something that stated, if you were married or not. And now you're divorced and married to somebody else, but on your passport, you have to put your previous marriages, not your current. So I used to be a Williams and Anderson or whatever, but now I'm a Smith. Like that's ludicrous. Or your address. Don't put your current address, put where you lived before. It makes no sense. Why would it make any sense to do the exact same thing regarding an M or an F or an N for neither? I'm non-binary. I don't identify as either. So can I get an N or a 0 or whatever symbol to represent? None of these apply to me. James, see, Christine, you got me fired up there because
I can tell. I can tell.
James.
So there's a lot. I think it's really super important for folks to do the work. And I'm going to get on my soapbox here for just a second. I think it's really important for folks to realize where they are at inside the way they relate to culture, the way they relate to gender, the way they relate to sexuality. And this healing process that can take place when we start opening our heart rather than coming from the mental tape or mental loop that we learn from our parents or our church where we grew up or the TV when we were a kid. And I think it's doubly important now that we have a lot of the structures in our country, in America, are being ripped apart. It's doubly important that people can notice themselves and notice what actions they can take, notice what choices they can make around honoring all people of any gender, all people. So that's one of the things I got about what you said, Ray, and what you said, Christine. And I just want to hand the ball back to you, Christine.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to add to that. I think the idea is that doing your work, in my mind, I guess, is an invitation to be curious, not to jump to judgment that somebody's wrong or they shouldn't do it this way or they shouldn't do it that way without being curious about it. And if you find someone or run into someone who is transgender or shares that part of their identity with them, then be curious about it. Ask it, is it all right for me to ask you a question? If I'm respectful about it, and if they say I'm really not comfortable with that, then respect that too. If you don't know what to say to someone, just congratulate them. That was my hot tip for people. If anybody ever says, I'm transitioning, I'm now going to live the rest of my life as a woman, if you are dumbfounded, struck silent, just say congratulations, because it is something to congratulate them on, for their courage, for their authenticity, for their vulnerability with sharing that aspect of themselves with you. But doing your own work, what tapes am I playing, to use your term, James, what kind of early childhood judgments do I have, is a good thing. And I'll just self-disclose, transgender people are transphobic too, just the same way as my experience of gay and lesbian folks is they have their own internalized homophobia. You can't watch people in our queer community be depicted on TV shows and things as the butt of jokes and all of that, and not internalize that at a point before you're able to really discerningly analyze it. So part of my work ongoing is to heal my own internalized transphobia from the message I got from my parents, is that this is a horrible part of you and something we need to eradicate, rather than that this is something to be celebrated.
Powerful. Thank you for that. And as you were saying that, what came up, because I know one of the things in your life experience was how gender dysphoria impacted you. And as you were sharing that and the piece about the cost, because I don't know that many people actually think about in all of the areas that this new embodied person is stepping into: the legal, the medical, the psychological, the social, the cultural, like all of these realms. And so in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, in my mind, then there's also a level of cultural dysphoria when culture doesn't allow me to fit in the way perceived culture says I'm supposed to fit in, or privilege dysphoria of how, wow, wait a minute. At one point, you all let me talk, and now all of a sudden, because I'm me, when I wasn't me, you wouldn't let me talk. Now that I am me, you want to interrupt me. So there's like a privilege dysphoria, and it just boggles my mind in how many different ways there's this almost, okay, I got to readjust again. I have to come out again. I have to disclose again. I have to be at choice point so often of disclose, don't disclose. Don't disclose, not yet. Disclose, don't disclose. Yes, I can now. Say that, okay, what? And it's like an ongoing, does it ever end? And just in my mind, how do you ensure that you're taking care of yourself with all of this that comes to you?
I'm just making it up as I go, Ray. I honestly,
I hear you.
I mean, the idea of disclosing or not disclosing is something that I've spoken with some of my, transgender brothers and sisters about, or siblings, if you will, so we don't put a binary gender on it. Do we disclose and do we not disclose? And if we disclose, when do we disclose and why do we disclose, right? I don't introduce myself as, hi, I'm transgender activist, Reverend Christine Renée Monks. I mean, it's not anybody's business. I don't tell them what my genitals look like. I don't think that's anybody's business, so, but oftentimes people think they are, or their business. And oftentimes I think I'd shared that something when we talked earlier about this idea of preemptively othering ourselves as a way of being safe, so that I don't get blindsided by somebody who's triggered when they realize they had no idea I was trans, and then something happened that made them realize I was. And then they feel like I fooled them, or I tricked them, or I did some story in their mind. So it's a constant thing that we try to look at. I think depending on how well you integrate into the role that you are. I mean, I don't like to use the term passing, but sometimes people use that term passing. But it implies I'm trying to be something I'm not, right? So if I'm passing as a woman, I'm acknowledging I'm not a woman, and I don't acknowledge that. So it's a tricky thing, but there is a social cost to it. I mean, you kind of alluded to cost at the beginning of this. I mean, I had a friend of mine that I had had for over 35 years, and he said, I never want to see you again, when I told him. And it's like, and it didn't compute to me. It didn't make sense. It's like, do you think people will think you're gay if you're out with me? And it's like, I just don't want to see you again. I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to talk to you. And we haven't. We have had no contact since my transition. So that's a cost, I didn't expect that. Most of my family has been super supportive. In fact, I'll say all of my family has been super supportive. And so that's good. I didn't lose my family, but certainly when younger kids transition, oftentimes their parents kick them out of the house and say, I no longer have a child, because their conception of what their son was going to turn into turned out to be what their daughter was going to turn into. And they just couldn't deal with that.
Yeah.
But along that lines, whenever somebody is transitioning, I've noticed with many parents, they tend to go back and refer to them as like, I have a transgender son, which to me says their son was assigned female at birth, and that's not often what they mean. So when you're concerned about pronouns, if you're concerned about how to refer to somebody in the past, you always use the pronouns where they are today. So you don't talk about me using male pronouns prior to when I transitioned, you use female. And if you say I have a transgender daughter, I assume that person was assigned male at birth. It's where you're going to, not where you're from, to tie back to what you said about your addresses, right? It's not like what house you lived in when you were born. It's the house you're living in right now.
Yes.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
you've done this 2 or 3 times already, but I want to open it up and just ask this question. What thoughts would you have for someone that is considering gender affirming surgery?
Most people who follow what's called the WPATH guidelines require you to live full-time in your identified gender prior to doing any surgical changes to your body. And I think that's a really solid strategy to do this. It's not okay for me to say I'm going to be a woman when it's easy to be a woman, but I'm not going to be a woman where it's uncomfortable for me to be a woman. It's not okay, especially if I'm going to have gender affirming surgery. And when I say I'm not okay, I'm not suggested, in my opinion. I'm not making anybody wrong to do whatever suits them. But if you're afraid to come out to your parents, that should be a sign that you haven't totally done your work, you haven't done your healing. So gender affirming surgery, to me, gender affirming surgery aligned an incongruity for me with my body and my brain. If the doctors had said, you're too old, Christine, your heart can't take it, your health conditions are such that you couldn't do it, I would have made peace with not being able to do that. So I just think before people do that, it's useful for them to really do their work, talk with other people who've done it, talk with a psychologist or a counselor who specializes in gender issues and can help you evaluate this roadmap, and do it a step at a time, right? What's the next logical step in your transition? Starting cross-gender hormones would be typically a first step as far as a physical transition. Don't start it and say, I want to have surgery tomorrow. See how you do with all of those things, because I think there can sometimes be a tendency to want to get to the finish line fast because you've missed all this time, right? I wish I had transitioned when I was 18. My life would be so much better. But I wouldn't have 2 wonderful daughters if I'd done that. I wouldn't have 2 beautiful granddaughters if I'd done that, right? So all things in their perfect timing, and just trust that as it unfolds, if it still feels like you're inclined or inspired to do it, to do that. Does that make sense, James?
It does. Thank you. That was brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I know we're coming up to the hour in a moment. So first, should anyone would like to reach out and contact you, email, anything, what's your preferred method of communication?
Yeah, thanks. I have an email account, Christine@ChristineRenee.com, which would be my preferred contact way. I do have a ChristineRenee.com website, but it's not ideal at this point. I need to do a little more work around that. But yeah, I'm on Facebook also as Christine Renée Monks. if you put the Renee in there, there's only me. So there might be other Christine Monkses, but there's only one Christine Renee. And yeah, reach out to me. I'm happy to connect with people. If you have questions, if you're looking for some kind of support, I'm certainly happy to be a resource for things like that.
Greatly appreciated. And before we close, I'll just share a couple of resources that might be of interest to folks. So just some things that folks can read. And there are some transgender influencers, activists out there. One that if the concept of transgender athletes is of concern to you, I suggest reaching out to the name on their Instagram page is Pink Manta Ray, because the things he shares are profoundly clear and concise about how ludicrous it is to be in this space of the trans people shouldn't be. So just know that there are a lot of resources out there regarding what it means to accept our siblings, regardless of pronouns, regardless of our religious affiliations, etc. It's simply a matter of we're all humans. Can we just love and respect people? Can we let people live their lives? Christine Renee is not causing anyone any harm. Can we let Christine Renee live her life? Just come on now. Simple as that. And there's a possibility, I'm going to put this out there, I'm sure James would agree, that, because I'm curious how all of this have impacted the ministerial aspect. So we may be inviting you back for another conversation. But at this moment, thank you so very much for saying yes. You have lit up the energy of this podcast in ways that I feel like we're going to go professional now. I mean, in all seriousness, I appreciate your honesty, your authenticity, your wealth of knowledge, and your willingness to talk about your experiences in a way that I don't often hear people talk about, such as the cost. So I greatly appreciate you for being you and showing up as you do.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. This has been a fun conversation. It's felt very natural and respectful. I will do a quick plug. I just finished reading Sarah McBride's book. Tomorrow Will Be Better, I think is what it's called. But she is the representative to the House of Representatives from Delaware, the first transgender person elected to the House of Representatives. And she's an excellent writer, and her story is quite compelling too. So if you're looking for things like that, I thought that was a nice read, and it's topical as far as when she transitioned was back during the Obama administration and just the changes that have happened since then. So, but that was a good book.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Anything, James?
Yeah, for me, Christine, two things. You're very authentic and you're very vulnerable. And when those two things come together inside of a human, it's power. And it's not, I'm not talking about force, like a closed fist hitting someone. I'm talking about power, wherein all your authentic expression flows. And that's important for you being a person first, but it's super important being that you're a trans woman. You're modeling authenticity and vulnerability, and your power is a huge gift. You're modeling for other folks that might be on the tipping point. Well, do I want to transition or not? So thank you for just being an amazing human being on the planet.
Well, thank you, James. I think you're a pretty amazing human being on the planet too. Both of you are. So this has been my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. So until next time, everyone, be well, be blessed, and we will see you soon.